But don't feel you have to. Like, if you're like, I really want to understand more about retinal scanning and what its strengths and weaknesses are, that can 100% help your paper out. And generally, if you find those outside sources and integrate them, they can make a stronger paper. However, if you don't include those, you can still write an A paper. Like, you can get an A to A+ paper even without going outside the textbook. However, if you want to, they can help as well. It's totally up to you what you want to do with it. If you are, let me think, what other business points do I have? So yeah, and that goes in terms of paper, prompts, writing, email, anything, like as many as you want to send. If you send me your first draft tomorrow, it usually takes me like 2 days to get them back to you. And usually I send them to me in Word documents if you can, Google Docs. Very often what I do is I will correct and give comments as I'm on the train, which means if it's in a Google Doc, it's much harder for me to do because I need internet access. But if you send me a Word doc, I can just download it, put the comments in, and send it back to you. So the less internet requirement, the better. If that's impossible for you, we'll make it work, but then it'll be a slightly slower turnaround. Okay, so also, oh, here's another one. Tied in with reasons and paragraphs. Another general point, so this is back from the business side to the actual paper writing side. Try not to jump around too much. And what do I mean by that? Well,
oh yeah, like bring up a point and then like in the case of this paper, like talk about utilitarianism and then talk about, you know, deontology as opposed to, you know, utilitarianism and about, you know, you and Thomas growing up and, you know, y'all close relationships.
Yes, so
and
here's one thing is you don't want to include things that are distracting or rambling. You want to stay focused. So, for instance, in the paper about the history of like retinal scanners, you don't have to tell me about the way they were depicted in James Bond movies in the 60s. That's interesting in its own right. However, it's not directly relevant here. You want to only include things that tie in. Or, if you start, you also don't have to tell me everything possible about a topic. Now, generally, I won't take off points on this unless it's like making it harder for me to remember what's come before. And sometimes that does happen. So you want to ask yourself, is this really needed for my paper? Another thing on this point with jumping around is, so say you have 3 reasons. So going back to our Olive Garden, if you say your 3 reasons needed at Olive Garden are the quality of the food, the unlimited breadsticks make a good bang for your buck, and it's Post Malone's favorite restaurant, you want to keep those separate. You want to say all the things that prove that it has a good variety of food all at once, and then once you're done talking about that, you're done, and you don't have to talk about it anymore. Keep it all contained. Then in the next paragraph, you talk about the breadsticks, and all you talk about in that paragraph is the breadsticks. And then once you're done with that, you move on to the next one. And then you talk about Post Malone. What you don't want to do is in one paragraph talk about the quality of the food, then the breadsticks, then the quality again, then Post Malone, then the breadsticks, then the food quality. It just makes it much harder to follow. And it can give the reader like, a, wait, what? So just think about it. If like you're having have you ever tried to have a conversation with an actual like small child about something they're very excited about? And you know how they just like jump around everywhere and they're like, then this happened, then that happened, and you're just like, I cannot keep up with anything you're saying, and you end up just nodding along. That's what you want to avoid in this paper. And that's one of the big differences between like a nice, slow, reasoned argument. And it's also, you know, why it's much easier to understand people who talk slowly and pacing. And also just a useful skill for knowing when you've been rambling and jumping too much is try reading your paper out loud. And if you're running out of breath, it's probably a sign that you like, it's a little bit messy. One last thing is length of the paper. 3 to 5 pages. That is a recommended number. That is the number of pages I generally find it takes to answer these prompts well. What this means, which is anywhere between, it's usually between like 900 and 1,500 words. What that means, however, is not anything hard. It's not a hard deadline. If you turn in something that's only 2 pages long, but you do everything you needed to do to make your point and make it clearly and make it easy to follow, it's not going to affect your grade that it's only 2 pages long. If you get carried away and you're really interested, and you stay focused and on topic, and describe in and out every possible thing there is to say about privacy and the MTA, and none of it feels rambly, but your paper's 26 pages, I will not take off for that. I will wonder why you care that much about my class, but I would never take off points for that. If, however, you turn in 26 pages because you tell me about all the strange things you've seen on the subway in your life, and none of it is directly relevant, then it'll affect your grade. But as long as it's focused, I really don't care about page limits. It's totally up to you, and that's what this, basically, whatever you feel comfortable with is what I'm going to ask you to do. Any other questions on this sort of stuff? So just one last thing is in terms of good reasons, or one last point is in terms of your thesis. The way the prompts are written, they suggest 2 main reasons, or 2 main conclusions, either yes or no, pro or con. If, however, you want to take a middle ground, you're welcome to. However, this is just like a cautionary point I want to make. So in like the Bruce Wayne example, the 2 pros and cons are liquidate the company or find them. Now, in the middle, there's a whole lot of middle ground. You could say just fire the CEO. Anything like that is in an okay position. What I don't want to do, so any middle ground is okay. But what's not good is if the way you approach a middle ground is just to say something like, some people say this, some people say that. That's not a thesis. A thesis is, some people say this, some people say that, and they're both a little bit right, so the correct conclusion to draw is this. That is a super interesting, subtle thesis. But the threat that you can fall into is just saying, this is what some people think, here's what other people think. You don't just want to describe a case, you want to take a position. The position can be interesting, subtle, your own, but you want to make sure that there is a clear thesis that you're arguing for.
So in other words, you want us to create a paragraph of compare and contrast. Meaning like why both of them like agree with each other, but like
if you choose that way. Like, to be clear, I'm not saying that that is a mandatory. You do not, if you want to say like Bruce Wayne is 100% correct, this company should only be fined, yes, you can write an A+ paper that way. But if your opinion is we need a middle ground, don't just say that a middle ground is needed. Don't just say that there are arguments on both sides. Explain to me why the fact that there are arguments on both sides shows something.
show, not tell.
Yeah. So like in the same sort, it's the difference between saying like people who thought the Yankees were going to win the World Series had some points, and people who thought the other teams were going to win it had some points. The end. Instead, you say like, and that proves that it's stupid to try to bet on sports. That's a thesis. All right, I think that's all I want to say on this point, unless anyone else has any questions. I think that's good. So this is the end of the how to write a paper discussion. If, however, you have any questions, comments, concerns, feelings, worries, ideas, anything, email me, talk to me after class, you name it, we're good to go. Until next time, you don't have to think about your papers for a little bit if you don't want to, or you can get them started now. It's totally up to you. You've got time though. All right. I'm going to go shut off the camera and see everybody next week.